Okay, this is my review of a scientific method virtual lab. Like this lab for sure. There's a lot of good value to it. So let's go ahead and begin. So the lab is kind of broken down into a tutorial that sort of explains the step of the scientific method. And then in the end, they get to actually run their own experiment. I went through both of these. I like the tutorial. It gives the audience or the students an opportunity to learn about the aspects of the scientific method and gives them all these fun little riddles to play with as you go through it. It asks questions, and then it's kind to you if you get the answers wrong and sort of works you through it. Here, for example, is one of the logic puzzles that they start with. And I think these will do a really good job of drawing the students in and give them a chance to play. Once you get past that, it talks about the value of defining a problem, how collecting information is important, and the value of formulating a good hypothesis. And here, I'll walk you through this one. It says once you gain information, you try to develop a hypothesis. It gives you this mystery about Spock finding someone who has a dream during the last night and what was going on. And of course, in this instance, it asks you what your specific hypothesis might be with regards to this. And so here are 3 potential hypotheses based on the information that you have. And he didn't think she was doing her job because she was awake at night when she should have had her dream, and so on. It walks through this. Gives you an opportunity to test the hypothesis and walks through what a variable is and the difference between a confounding variable and the independent variable. And then, of course, drawing a conclusion that's appropriate based on results. And it talks about some anecdotal stories where people don't do this well. And then you can move on to the cricket experiment itself. And here, after a brief introduction, it defines the problem for you as this variable that crickets have. Crickets, when you go hiking in the woods in the summertime or in the springtime, they chirp relatively slowly, or at least this one cricket does. When you return several months later, the cricket chirps a lot faster, and it records a little of your data for you here. And then finally, you go a third time in the fall, and it's kind of chirping at a medium time frame this last time. And it sort of sets up your problem. At this point, you can go and collect information, and it gives you a series of somewhat useful and somewhat not useful information on crickets. So you kind of got to contrast what's valuable to you. And then you're given an opportunity to formulate a hypothesis. And when you formulate a hypothesis, you pick one of several variables to sort of see if it affects crickets. And so here are the 6 different variables you can manipulate. And you can actually run through the experiment manipulating several different variables as you go through. So really it sets you up to kind of manipulate each of them and either eliminate them or see how they affect cricket chirping rate. And the worksheet that goes with this kind of lines it out in the same way. And after you formulate a hypothesis here, you can go on and perform the experiment. And in the performance of the experiment, you actually control the variables you need to, which is everything, of course, except for your independent, and then you walk through and you draw a conclusion. And it's critical of you if you don't know enough about the actual what's going on with the crickets. It kind of tells you don't quite understand the process and invites you to go back to it. I like this. I think there's a lot that's good about it. The information is challenging. I think the actual process of running the experiment is something that's worthwhile for students, and they can sort of realize that a conclusion takes a little bit of time to develop, and also that the absence of a result is actually a result. So perhaps humidity doesn't affect them, but temperature does. It's important to know both of those pieces of information. What I think is a little challenging about this is it doesn't give the students a lot of freedom to kind of play around with things. It's very much this is where we're headed, and it guides you down a path, but there's only one path to get to the answer. And I think that's not really how real science works. There are lots of different answers out there, but obviously there's some constraints with this format. That said, it does a good job of giving the students an introduction to the scientific method where they actually run their own experiment. In a digital environment that we're living in right now, I think this would be a good way to have the kids actually conduct an experiment.